Brittany, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mark. I'm well. How are you?
I'm just fine. Thanks for getting up so early in the morning, too.
Certainly, I'm glad to be here.
So, Brittany, you looking forward to the Women's Convention?
I am. I'm definitely looking forward to this gathering. As you said, it's historic. This is the first National Women's Convention in a number of decades in this country. And I'd say it's highly overdue, but it's certainly time for us to be having this conversation now.
Uh, Folks, though you don't know, and you should know this, in 2015, Brittany helped launch Campaign Zero, a comprehensive policy platform to end police violence. She served on President Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force and the Ferguson Commission. First of all, Brittany, in terms of your ongoing work, and I know you're also part of Teach for America, in terms of your
hmm
ongoing work, are we making any progress in terms of
No,
confronting and combating police violence?
absolutely believe we are. Those first three things that you mentioned were an outgrowth of me being a protester. So I was really raised in a tradition of social justice. I've been a protester and an activist all my life, but was on the streets of Ferguson in summer of 2014 after the killing of Michael Brown, just near my home, actually. So I only lived about 15 minutes away from Ferguson. That's where I grew up. And, on the streets, we were seeking justice, but we were also trying to call attention to a problem that we had known had been going on in the Black community for decades. And it wasn't yet front page news. It is now. This is a topic of conversation. Criminal justice and police violence are topics of conversation that many, many, many more people are not only taking seriously, but they're getting much more educated about, and they're understanding the racial disparities that exist within those issues. We've seen a number of laws be passed that take on at least two or more of Campaign Zero's 10 policy platform points. Things like more transparent police union contracts, better training, preserving the ability of citizens and the right of citizens to film the police, citizens review boards with real teeth and power, and lots of other things. We've also seen better use of forest contracts in places like Baton Rouge and Sacramento that are taken directly from Campaign Zero reports. But at the end of the day, we certainly have a long way to go, but it's important to celebrate the wins so that we have confidence to move forward.
Brittany Packnett with us, folks. Brittany, what can we look forward to in terms of the Women's Convention and your involvement? What are you going to be doing there?
I think a lot of this is still coming together, and as we think about the conversation that we want to have, I feel especially responsible to help represent women of color in this conversation. Mark, I know this is not news to you, but so many movements, so many social justice movements, from LGBTQ equity to women's movements historically in this country, have left out more marginalized people, people who have intersectional identities, women of color, LGBTQ folks of color. And so it is important that we're at the table and not on the table. And so I want to be a part of a conversation for not making the mistakes that our foremothers made, by leaving people out of the conversation because we think it's more politically expedient, but ensuring that everybody is actually included in an equity movement.
That's important that we have that. Are we making any progress, you think, in that vein, Brittany? In
I
terms of,
believe,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. I believe that we are, right? I have friends with and have deep respect for Carmen Perez and Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour, who are all co-chairs of the Women's March, and their presence was very important. I know a lot of women of color didn't feel included in that particular event. I did attend myself, knowing full well that I understood the complaints of many sisters who said, where were all these women when we were asking people to show up for Sandra Bland? Where were all these women when we were asking people to show up for Rekia Boyd? They were not present. I do understand that. I also know, though, that none of us are born woke, right? Something wakes us up. And so I don't really care how you got woke. I just care that you stay woke. I recognize that the Women's March was an important entry point for lots of
Right,
people. So
right.
now that you're here, How can I have a more nuanced conversation with you and hold you accountable to making this movement much more inclusive? Because I'm not going to be left behind. And to your question, I think that we are making progress. When we see sisters like the ones that I've named up front, when we see people like Lucy McBath, the mother of Jordan Davis, who was
Right.
killed by a white vigilante
Right.
in Jacksonville, Florida, running for the state legislature in Georgia. When we see people like Ramesh Akbari, who's a friend of mine from college, working in the Tennessee state legislature and standing on stage at the DNC. I think that women of color have been making it clear that we're here, that we're not going anywhere. So it's about time to include us.
866-99-SIRIUS, 866-997-4748. Brittany Packnett with us, folks. She'll be at the Women's Convention, this historic occasion over the weekend. Brittany, as we talk about women and diversity in terms of women's issues, I just want to ask you something, because I think sometimes it's a little different for women of color. I've been having this conversation with a few
Mm-hmm.
folk. April Rain was with us last week.
Sure.
Some black women, because it all hasn't come together yet, don't necessarily like to call themselves feminist because of the perception that term is a term that is exclusive to white
Sure.
women. What's your position on that? Do you consider yourself a feminist, Brittany?
I consider myself a feminist. I consider myself a womanist, right, which is the term that black women came up with to account for the fact that feminism often didn't include them. Listen, if you're not into labels, I understand. I just need all of us, men, women, people of all gender identities, to be committed to the equity of women, to be committed to closing the gender pay gap for women of all races and not just white women, to be committed to ending sexual assault and sexual harassment in the workplace and college everywhere. And obviously, this is an important topic right now. We see a very different reaction to accusations against Harvey Weinstein than we've seen against accusations on accusations against R. Kelly for the last several years. And so these are the kinds of inequities that black women especially are facing, and the anti-blackness that we experience in America can be found in every space, including in women's spaces. So I certainly understand the sentiment, but I'm much less concerned about the labels and much more concerned about our collective commitment to making sure that women of all races and all backgrounds are supported, experience equal progress, and experience equity everywhere they go.
Brittany Packnett with us, folks. She will be at the Women's Convention. We look forward to hearing from her. And before we go, sister, any projects specifically you're working on right now that we should look forward to?
Absolutely. I would go and take a look at ourstates.org. It's something that we created from the Campaign Zero team, trying to make sure that voters are educated and empowered, that they know when their local elections are, that they know what their local elections are, what their local electeds are doing on important topics, everything from LGBTQ rights to criminal justice to police violence and lots of things in between. You can also go take a look at my website, Build, Love, and Power, for some great gear to wear in your activism, as well as some of the articles and musings that folks in the community, the online community that we're developing at Love and Power, have been coming up with to keep us all encouraged.
All right. Brittany Packnett, folks, one of our dynamic activists and organizers, a very, very strong sister. We have a lot of respect for her. Brittany, please, let's not make this the last time we speak. I want to support everything you're doing. So this forum is always available to you. Keep us posted about everything you're doing. Let's talk more often, please, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks for all you do, Mark. Thanks for keeping the people informed.
Thank you, sister. Take care now. Be strong. One
You as
love.
well.
All right. Take care. Brittany Packnett, folks, at the Women's Convention coming up this weekend.